All right.
Welcome, everyone, to It's a Wrap with Rap. I am your host, Ron Rappaport. This podcast features people who have overcome life's challenges and adversities, people who can inspire and motivate, and people who can educate us on an assortment of topics. My guest today is Kim "Kid" Curry, former DJ legend and radio executive for 33 years, 25 of them in Miami, Florida, working for top-tier radio stations such as Power 96X Miami, Y100 Miami, I-95 WINZ Miami, KTSA San Antonio, Texas, WASH Washington, D.C., just to name a few. Kim has worked with big name entertainers such as Gloria Estefan, Jay-Z, and Snoop Dogg, just to name a few also. He has been awarded the prestigious Street Information Network Career Achievement Award. After research into his MS disease progression, he decided to retire from broadcasting to deal with his MS diagnosis, and eventually taking up writing and authoring his memoir, Come Get Me Mother, I'm Through, and also does MS advocacy work, among many other things. Welcome, Kim, to the podcast.
Ron, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Oh, our pleasure. I read your book, Come Get Me Mother, I'm Through, and it was a great read. Let's start at the beginning. Tell us about your early years growing up in Colorado and what sparked you to get into broadcasting.
Well, my dad was retired from the U.S. Navy after 20 years, a Korean War veteran, and had a variety of different jobs. When I was in high school, my senior year, he had landed as the news director / sales guy at the only radio station in my hometown. And he came home one day and he said his boss wanted to know if I wanted to babysit. And I assumed that he wanted me to babysit his children because back then in high school, that's how I used to make my money, was babysit my parents' friends' kids. So I got to the radio station expecting to see his kids, and the general manager said, no, I don't want you to babysit them. I need you to babysit the radio station. And what he meant by that was Sunday mornings, they would play back the previous week's church services on the radio, and nobody wanted that job. So I needed a high school kid.
Yeah.
And that got to be me. So that's how I got started. And it was unique because the radio station was very old school. Well, we say that word now, but they were playing Sammy Davis Jr. and I was wanting to play the Beatles.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a culture clash at high school, but it was the only station in town. And it was kind of neat being able to hear my voice on the radio. So
you got the bug there.
Yes, sir.
Tell us how you got the name Kid Curry.
Well, okay. So I go to college, to University of Southern Colorado. Back then they call it Southern Colorado State College. And I went for 2 years or so. And at the same time, I was part-time on one of the commercial top 40 radio stations in town. Now, you can't call a guy Kim in the 1970s. You just didn't do that. There were not too many guys named Kim.
Yeah.
And that's my name.
That didn't work. Yeah.
So the first day I got my first job in this top 40 radio station, there was a guy in the office in the production room, and he was recording all these drops, all the things that say, Larry King plays the best, whatever, all these big, deep voice guys. And the boss turned around and he looked at me and he said, we have to make one for the news guy. And then he said, well, we can't call you Kim. And he turned around and he picked up a 45 single, and he said, okay, we'll call you Gary Paxton. Well, the single he picked up was The Monster Mash by Bobby Porras Pickett, but it was written by Gary Paxton. Fast forward the connection to Tammy Faye Baker, but that's a whole nother story. Okay. So that was my first radio name, was Gary Paxton. I spent 2 years or so in college, I got the oats, man. I knew I could do this radio thing and I wanted to go out and get a full-time job. So I applied for jobs across America with these air checks. Now, what you do to apply for radio jobs is you only put on tape the things you say, you cut out the music. So on these air checks, that's how we apply for a job. I sent them out. A guy in Knoxville, Tennessee offered me my first full-time job. So as I'm driving across the country to my first full-time job in Knoxville, I was going on at 10 o'clock at night. I knew I needed a new radio name. And because I was going on at 10 and it was, the 1970s, I wanted to call myself Night Smoke.
That's a
because you
neat
know.
name, Night Smoke.
So it was very much a memory that I cannot get rid of in my head. I drove up to the radio station in Knoxville my first day and walked up the stairs and opened the door and put my hand out to the receptionist who was sitting at the desk, and behind her was a big guy with curly hair. And I stuck out my hand to the lady and said, "Hello, ma'am. My name is Night Smoke. I'm your new nighttime DJ." And the guy behind her said, "Well, if it isn't Kid Curry." And I said, "Well, first of all, you have to know why Kid Curry was there. Back in the 1970s, or actually the 60s, remember Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid?
Yeah, sure.
The ABC television network did a show called Hannibal Hayes and Kid Curry. It was a version of Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, and one of the characters was called Kid Curry. So when I was in high school, my friends would joke at me, "Hey, Kid Curry." So when he said, "Well, if it isn't Kid Curry," I said, "Sir, I hate that name. My friends call me that." And he says, "Well," I said, "Well, Kid Curry it is." I didn't know he was the boss, but that's how I got the job. And that's how I got the name Kid Curry. And it stuck with me. I didn't know at the time, but it was the smartest thing that I've
Oh, you know what? We're breaking up for some reason.
been me.
Can you hear me?
Mm. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sorry, I was
Yeah.
just taking a drink of water, you know.
Oh, I think our internet connection is a little unstable. That's why. Could you just repeat that when you were talking to the guy behind the desk? I don't think it went through because of the internet.
Okay, no problem. So I walk up, I shake the lady's hand. I said, "Hello, my name is Night Smoke. I'm your new nighttime DJ." And the guy behind the lady at the receptionist desk says, "Well, if it isn't Kid Curry." Now, I don't like the name Kid Curry because in the 70s, there was a TV show called Alias Smith and Jones. It starred Kid Curry and Hannibal Hayes. It was a takeoff of the original Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. So when I was in high school, my friends would always joke at me because, hey, Kid Curry. So I didn't like the name.
Right.
So the guy behind the receptionist says, "Well, if it isn't Kid Curry," and I said to him, "Well, I'm sorry, I hate that name." And he said, "Well, then I won't sign your check." And I said, "Well, Kid Curry it is."
Yeah.
And because there's only been one Kid Curry, as far as I know, on the radio since then. I've been one. There's only one. So
Well,
it's
that's
very hard to confuse me with others.
very unique. Take us through the journey you had from being a DJ to being a top radio executive around the country, and then finally to Miami, where you circled back and spent 25 of your 33 years in the industry. I know that's a big task to ask, but you know, if you can briefly do it.
I think I can tell a good story here.
Okay.
You know, you got to kind of go back to the days of radio in general. There was a time when there was only AM radio, and then they came up with FM radio. That's frequency modulation as opposed to amplitude modulation. Frequency modulation, FM, means if you can see the tower, you can pick up the radio station. Amplitude, AM, bounces off the ionosphere. So AM was there first. All top 40, all music, everything was on AM. Then there came a time in the early 70s, late 60s, when you had these FM radio stations appear. And because they were experimental, they didn't really put much faith in them. And they let the guys go on the radio and say, "Well, before that we heard, and before that we heard." And it was kind of a hippie type radio station. So eventually, top 40 music went from the AM dial to the FM dial. And when I was in college, it was a brand new thing. And we were very excited about hearing top 40 music on FM. And one of the premier battles in America on FM was happening in Miami. It was happening between Y100 and at that time it was 96X. So I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee. I get this job offer from a guy at 96X. Come to find out his name is Jerry Clifton, and he is in the Battle of Miami Radio. Y100 was the premier station because they had money. They gave away lots of cash. Their program director was Bill Tanner. 96X, the guy who hired me, was named Jerry Clifton. They didn't have any money, but what made Jerry Clifton unique is he figured out different ways to play psychological games on the radio that attracted listeners, as opposed to Y100 was giving away $50,000 cash prizes, the largest cash prizes in America at the time. So I go down there to work for the competition, the guys who are trying to knock off number one.
Right.
Well, 6 months after I get to 96X and I'm brainwashed by Jerry Clifton, who is a genius, we were having tons of success. Well, he got fired. He got dismissed because of an earlier contest he had done years prior, and he took blame for it. And the FCC eventually came in and shut down the frequency, 96.3 at the time. So when he got fired 6 months after I got there, I was preparing to find a job somewhere else in America because Jerry Clifton had us thinking that Y100 was the devil. This is competition, broadcasting competition, ratings.
Right.
And so he wanted to beat them up. So he made us think they were the devil. So I never have thought to apply to Y100. I applied at other stations around America. Like the third day after Jerry leaves, I get a phone call on my show at night on 96X from my competition at Y100, who tells me that he is leaving to go to Boston, and his boss, Bill Tanner, has decided he wants me to be the guy to replace him.
Wow.
Because I had a unique radio style. Back then, all DJs had big, deep voices, but I have a very unique, young sounding voice, even more so 40 years ago. So the Kid Curry act was pretty impressive back then, and he decided to hire me. So now I've gone to work for one legend and then worked for another legend. These two smart guys were extremely important in the radio business and in having successful radio station gather massive amounts of audience. So that branded me. I was, as a young child, hired by these two guys, and it really helped my radio career. And I worked for these guys most of my time. After I left Miami, I went to San Antonio to work for Jerry Clifton as a program director at KTSA. I'm there for a year or so, and then Bill Tanner moved from Miami up to Washington, D.C. to work for Wash FM, Party 97 Wash FM, very famous Washington, D.C. radio station. Now, it was a conservative station at the time, and the people at Metro Media, that's John Kluge, take that all the way back to Fox Television. So Metro Media decided they wanted to try to make a conservative station a top 40 station, and Bill Tanner had the most success at the time in America. So they hired him to go to DC. Bill brought me up to Washington, DC to fight that battle. Now, here's where my MS starts to show, if I can go ahead and start putting that in here.
Well, yeah, that's going to lead me into my next question, which is, tell us the stress all these jobs caused you, such as the lack of sleep, et cetera, as you were trying to do a very difficult job as a DJ at a top tier radio station and striving for a management position as a program manager. Well,
I can tell you that multiple sclerosis had been in my body my whole life. Yeah, I had exacerbations. I just didn't know what they were. I thought maybe I just had a bad flu. At one time, I thought I'd been beaten by fire ants. And then I thought I'd been stung by a killer bee. These things were happening to me at random through my life, but I just kind of blew them off. They go away over a couple of days. That was MS just showing. Right. And that happened periodically. I really had I wanted to be the boss someday. There was no doubt about it. But these guys always thought of me as their employee. So I, like a soldier, came in behind them and did what I was supposed to do. And Bill hired me in DC, and I had a feature at night. It was called Bed Check, and it was the big thing that it was what really created my persona. I would put everybody on the radio for, a quick moment at 5 minutes before the end of my show, and they could say random comments. Now, as a top 40 nighttime DJ, this show was always affected by teens. I mean, I would have kids calling in, and they could rip on their teacher, a friend, whatever the case may be. In Washington, D.C., it became a political statement, and I started getting political phone calls. I even got a call from a guy one time who called himself Frank DeFramer.
Yeah.
And because these were just random phone calls,
right.
This guy would call and say he was Frank DeFramer, and he had the president sitting there listening to me, and he was enjoying the bed check. And I would just go to the next call thinking the guy was just a freak. He was just calling and saying this. Eventually, I stopped my show, got him on the phone. He's called back 4 or 5 times. And I said, so Who are you? He said, well, my name is Frank DeFramer. I'm the official guy who takes care of the portraits in the White House. Somebody has to maintain the portraits in the White House, and that was his job, Frank DeFramer.
Yeah, who knew that, right?
Who knew?
Yeah.
So he became a radio telephone friend of mine. Now then Bill Tanner decides to go back to Miami. Like I said, I wanted to be the boss. I had been following these guys around for my career. That's the only two guys I worked for were Jerry and Bill. So I kind of wanted to break away. Bill wanted me to come back to Miami. I was in the Northeast. I really had a good time in Washington, D.C. So I decided to stay there and was offered a job at B104 in Baltimore. Now that was run by a guy by the name of Steve Kingston. Steve Kingston eventually ends up running Z100 New York, the biggest top 40 station of them all. So now I've worked for 3 of the geniuses of my business, and I believe I've learned enough to try to become program director a few times. But I was always looked over because I was the nighttime DJ. I had groupies coming to the radio station, and management never took me serious.
Kim,
yes, sir.
When I was reading the book, can you go back to that story with Frank DeFramer and tell the audience what happened when you actually, you know what I'm saying?
The exacerbation, yes, sir. So now I'm in Baltimore. I'm going to try to run through this. I was in Baltimore, and my girlfriend had her grandmother visit from Texas. Right. The grandmother, in a conversation at dinner, I told her that I had this friend at the White House, Frank DeFramer, tell her the story. She says, well, then I want to go take a tour of the White House. So then I've got to call the White House and say, hello, can I speak to Frank DeFramer? I had no idea what this guy's real name was. And the lady at the White House said, oh, sure, hang on, I'll get him for you. Oh, I was shocked. He gets on the phone and I'm like, hey, Frank, it's Kid Curry. He's, Kid, sure, where did you go? He didn't realize I'd gone to work in Baltimore. So I told him my story. I needed to come down and visit the White House with the grandma. Mm-hmm. So now this was just after the Reagan assassination attempt. They had not made any changes to the security around the White House. So when I went there that day, I got grandma in the back seat, girlfriend over there, and I'm driving around in my Toyota Celica, and I'm trying to figure out where to get into the White House. And there was this one road that looked like it went right up to the door. So I start going down this road, and as I'm driving down to the next door of the White House, the Secret Service starts pulling their guns on me. And I could see guys coming out of everywhere and guns. So at that point, stress took a major effect in my body, and stress is connected to MS. Yeah. So by the time I stopped my car and opened my door, I fell out of the car. My right arm completely paralyzed. My right eye went black. My legs were seizing, and I fell out of the car, and they're pointing their guns at me. And I'm yelling, yo, I'm here to see Frank DeFramer. And they're like, oh, Kid Curry. Yeah, Frank told us you're coming. No sweat. So that was an exacerbation. I did not know what it was, but it totally took me out. Oh, and now, so later in life, when I get diagnosed, I start to connect these buttons and I go, oh, this has really been here for a while. Stress really affected my job. And eventually it caught up with me.
So Kim, you kept experience off things physically, so to speak, you're right. Like when you were in New York at a meeting and what your mother said to you at a visit, when you went back to Colorado, she said, you've got to stop and smell the roses. And she told you didn't look like yourself. Something was wrong, such as a scowl on your face, and you seemed uneasy. At what point did you realize something very wrong was happening to you physically? And where did you first seek medical help? And did that start the process of finding a diagnosis of what was wrong?
Well, things were really hectic for me because, in 1996, by this time in 1996, I'd gone back to Miami. And then I don't want to get too confusing. So I'm back in Miami in 1996, and I worked for these guys, and now I'm at a station called Power 96, which is now connected to Bill Tanner and Jerry Clifton. They're the consultants. So now I'm back in the building working for the two guys I've always worked for. Right. And When one of them, Bill, gets dismissed because of a personal problem he got into, Bill gets fired because he was the actual in-house program director. Instead of making me the program director, and I'd been his assistant PD before, he gave it to his assistant, his music director, and his name was Frank Walsh. Now, Frank, life prior to, as I was running the station in San Antonio, Frank was my assistant. I always thought when Bill left, it should have been me. It wasn't. Frank runs the radio station for a couple of years, and then the ratings fail. So then they dismiss Frank. Now the program director is me in the interim. They've made me the interim program director. And now they're bringing in all these guys from all around the country. And when they come to my office, they say, hey, this is Kid Curry. He's our interim until we hire the right guy. And I'm telling the management, you need to make me the program director. I've been in this town for 20 some years now. I've got this figured out. You need to let me do it. And they continually said no for 6 months. However, I made changes to the radio station that increased the ratings during those 6 months. And eventually they had to decide that they were going to make me the program director.
They finally got it right.
Finally got it right. And at that particular moment in time, it all kind of, it gelled. We had the highest ratings in the history of the radio station. I didn't really do anything because I was set up. Bill Tanner and Frank Walsh set this radio station up for me. What I brought in was a different attitude. You know, you got just a different conductor. That's all it took. And I had the right vibe at the time. The station had the greatest ratings. But remember, this is a 24-hour radio station. And when you're the program director, you don't shut it off. I listen constantly. My kids, my two oldest, grew up listening to the radio station while they were watching television. I never shut it off. I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. All of this begins to build up.
Yeah.
And then I was in a unique situation where I had put together a boy band. And that's what you're talking about with the situation in New York City. I had gone to New York City to talk to some record companies about the boy band that I had put together. It just so happens the stress of being up there, coming out of my radio station coat to put on a record promoter coat, trying to go in front of these major record companies in a realm I've never been in.
Right.
And then there was also a major low pressure system also hit. My MS is affected by low pressure. So I'm up there that weekend and my body completely has a shutdown. I end up in the hospital after I've met with 2 or 3 record companies. That night I end up in the hospital. I'm totally in an exacerbation. I had no clue what was going on. I finally get home that night. My wife is concerned. And this is around Thanksgiving, right around Thanksgiving. And then we get into December. We go to visit my mother for the holidays. Now, my mom can see that there's something seriously wrong. Her son doesn't look right. My eye was drooping. I wasn't walking correctly. And she just flat said, you've got to go see somebody. You've got to stop and smell the roses. You've got to take some time for yourself. Those 2 things happening within a 4 or 5 month period made me slow down and go, wait a minute, now we really have a problem.
Yeah.
So by March or so, I had gone in. Actually, I went to my chiropractor of all things because I was not really a doctor guy. I thought if I'm walking funny, maybe the chiropractor, she can just kind of pop my back and get it back together. But it was the chiropractor who took off my shoes and she could see that my toes were curled. She said, no, there's something here I cannot fix. You've got to get to a neurologist. And I did, began the process of being diagnosed. Those tests take about 6 weeks. You go through some intense tests, needles, eye exams, ends up with spinal tap, which was extremely painful for me because of the situation. They couldn't find spinal fluid and they attempted 4 times in one day until they finally got it. So that kicked in the diagnosis. Actually, I was at a corporate meeting. Our corporate office was in Naples, so I was across the Alligator Alley over in Naples. I get a phone call in the big corporate meeting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday. I leave the room, go to my phone, and the doctor says, you know, you've got to come and see me on Monday. I am fully convinced you have multiple sclerosis. We need to start planning your new life. And so I walked back into the corporate meeting and gathered my briefcase and told the guys goodbye. Then I got in my car and got back on my phone to my wife and told her what had happened. Spent the next 3 hours going across Alligator Alley while she was Googling multiple sclerosis. Neither one of us had a clue. In that 3-hour drive back home, you realize some fairly serious things could happen. And so that was a Friday. Monday morning, I went into the office and told my office that what scared me was I had stopped being concerned about the radio station. That had never happened. I had only been concerned about my show or my radio station. And suddenly from 5 o'clock or whatever Friday afternoon until Monday morning at 6 a.m., the station didn't matter to me. What mattered to me was happening to me. So I went in that morning and told my boss that was it. They tried to hire me back and try to get me to stay. And I said, no, I was leaving. That point, my wife refers to that as our snow globe moment. That's the time when our whole life just got shaken and we had to sit back and wait for it all to fall because we didn't know what we were going to do. Didn't know what even if I was going to be able to have an income. But fortunately, I was such a busy program director. My office manager used to come into me and put papers on my desk and say, sign these. I didn't realize that she had made me sign a long-term insurance policy. So that suddenly was not a problem.
Well, that was a godsend.
Oh, are you kidding? You should have seen that day. I love that woman. I want to say hello to Phyllis. Phyllis will be watching this. Hello, Phyllis. I love you.
Well, I hope she's listening or watching.
Oh, she will.
Kim, how old were you at that time?
I was 50. I just turned 50.
Okay. Okay.
So that's when everything just stopped. And then you've got to see that all my life was being Kid Curry.
Sure.
I was the kind of guy people gravitated toward.
Yeah.
Well, over the next 2 or 3 years, I became the guy that people moved away from because I went from walking to a cane to crutches, eventually into a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And each progression made people stay further and further away from me. And that really messed with my mind. Not only was I going through that, but I was crashing with MS. I mean, I physically was falling apart, completely losing all function of my lower body. And it went on for around 8 years. So it took me a long time and I really never came out of it until my doctor decided that we needed to change the medicine. We needed to get he'd been preaching to me for years to start taking vitamin D. I had told him that as a DJ, I made jokes about vitamin C because my mom always said that. And then she'd call and sneeze at me.
Yeah.
So, I never really believed in vitamins, but the doctor made a medicine change. My wife convinced me we needed to start taking the vitamin D. 8 years into to a fairly serious degradation of my body, my condition leveled off. And 6 months after I took this medicine change, suddenly I was not getting any worse. And it really changed a lot of things because I'm thinking for years that I'm probably going to die because I see people dying with this disease and I'm not getting any better, but suddenly it just stopped. Now I can tell you that everything that was happening to me then happens now. My whole lower body right now is seizing. My legs are straight out. That's why I got to be in a wheelchair. My leg seize constantly. So my eye fails, my shoulders, I drop things because my joints don't work, but it's not gotten any worse. So I'm still on that medicine regimen. I'm still taking that vitamin D like crazy. But what changed after my condition leveled off for a couple of years? I had a friend who was very influential in the music business. He ran one of the largest magazines in the business. It was an independent magazine. You see people get the Grammys, but Beyonce wouldn't get that Grammy. Jay-Z wouldn't get it. Wyclef, Tom Jones wouldn't get their Grammy if it wasn't for the record promoters, the guys who actually get the songs on the radio stations. So this guy, Vince Pellegrino, at the Street Information Network, always held this big ceremony every year. It was an industry thing where he would give awards to the biggest promoters in the business, the guys who would actually get the songs on the radio, and it became a huge industry thing. Vince and I had become very close friends during the last 4 or 5 years of my reign at Power 96. After I got diagnosed, and I disappeared, because I honestly just disappeared. No one knew where I was. I have maybe 2 people that knew what was going on with me. Vince was one of them. His birthday was on April Fool's Day. I'm a 420 baby. So every April I'd get a phone call or an email from Vince on April Fool's or on my birthday, and I would shoot one to him on April Fool's. But I never realized, I just disappeared. My condition leveled off. I get a phone call one day from Vince. He's in his office and he says, I think it's time for you to come back and tell people where you've been. I want to fly you and your family out here to New York. You're going to be featured in my upcoming awards ceremony. I want to give you a Lifetime Achievement Award, and people need to see you. You need to be able to show them who you are today. And it really hit me. I mean, it really hit me. I mean, I had my whole life ripped away, and I thought no one cared anymore, because in reality, I didn't reach out. Nobody reached out to me. So I just disappeared. So
that must have been great to hear from Vince, though.
Oh, it was. But now I go to this thing and I see my entire career over 30 years sitting in front of me. They put me on stage. Actually, these big, heavy guys had to lift my wheelchair up on the stage.
Yeah.
And so I see everyone. I didn't really get to talk to Vince much because he was very busy that night. He catches me as I'm leaving. He says, listen, we're going to have breakfast tomorrow morning at the hotel. He comes over that morning and we're having breakfast, and he says, what I didn't tell you is I only have a few more months to live. And I just felt like I needed you to be here. I needed to see you one more time. And then he said, you need to come back. And I said, Vincent, this is radio, this is music. I'm too old. The generations have well past my time. But he wanted me to do something. He said, you just can't sit around. So that's what created this new me, this new writing thing.
Right.
The whole reason I wrote Come Get Me Mother, I'm Through was to tell my story of the career, my MS diagnosis, and then what happened after that. And then I wanted to tell the story of my friend Vince and how he really pulled me up and said, come on, you've got to shake yourself off.
Yeah, that's amazing. After you and your wife learned all you could about MS, you decided to retire. How did that decision affect your marriage and your emotional state?
Well, here's something that happens. Well, some women, some couples don't survive things like this. But my wife is Cuban.
Right.
So I'm sorry.
Ellie, right? That's her name is Ellie, right?
Elizabeth, Elizabeth. So yes, absolutely. But she's Cuban, and her thing was to let's rally the troops. We're going to get through this regardless. We're going to stay on top of it. My wife has afforded me everything I need to live a comfortable life. We got out to Colorado and we started doing fixing and flipping with my money. And she didn't like what was going on with the real estate industry. So she went out and got her license in real estate. A year and a half later, she's breaking records in the state per capita in real estate sales. 2 years after that, she becomes an international real estate consultant. And now that's what she does. And she is high pressure, smart, positive. And that's what helped get me through. Although I was having a problem with people and me, what I finally realized, though, after a while, Ron, is Kid Curry, who used to kind of be the guy when he walked in the room, is the same guy who rolls in the wheelchair. And
sure.
People still look at you. You're still the topic of conversation. So that's what happened. I started thinking, wait a minute, I'm going to make this advantage. So now I'm the guy. When I roll in, I'm the first guy that smiles. I take my mask off. I will say hello to everyone.
Right.
I'm the guy. I set the pace now in the room. And
you're the same guy. You're just doing it differently, right?
Well, you're absolutely correct. But I had to get there, Ron.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to get there. And then when I got there and I finally realized it, I'm okay now. And I love being out. I don't have, like I said, my wife affords me, I have a wheelchair for my car. I'm sitting in a wheelchair now.
Yeah.
Part of my book is how expensive it costs to be disabled in America. And
Yeah, we're
so,
going to get into that. We're going to
okay,
get
good.
into that.
I'll let you get there then. No problem, Ron.
Ellie or Elizabeth calls
Yes.
you Poppy. Am I right?
Mhm.
She calls
Yes,
you Poppy.
sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, do people you know from the past or just ordinary everyday people, do they treat you any differently now that you're in a wheelchair?
You know, yeah, it's become a funky thing. And this kind of happened at my last high school reunion, which would have been my 40th, when, when everybody first got to town, they all came over to see me, and they were like, hey, we'll get you on the golf cart and we'll take you out to the golf course. You can ride around the golf cart with us and everything. And then when it came time for the golf game, nobody wanted to come pick me up. So, and those are my high school friends. I mean, I thought, wow, but I understand because I can be a burden. Sometimes I get in the way of things, but I have a problem with some people who treat me that way. But it's not my place to decide what other people are going to see and what they're going to think. My place is to take care of me, and regardless of what happens, as I said, I control the room. I'm a really positive guy, and I have no problem making friends. So regardless of how they treat me, I don't really care. They're still my friends.
Good.
I understand.
That's a good way of doing it. Good. Yeah, good. In your book, you use the phrase, I'm killing it, referring to all the times you have fallen. Tell us how you use humor in the face of all the adversity you face with MS and avoided depression, which is experienced by some MS patients.
There came a point, Ron, when, first of all, I don't want to be in this wheelchair. And I didn't like it when I was going down. After my wife and I got this property out here in Colorado, we came back to my hometown. After I got diagnosed, the only thing I could think was to come back to my hometown because my mom is here. My high school friends are here. If I need help, hopefully they'll be there to help me out. And most of the times they did. I didn't really have a problem until my 40th reunion. Ron, part of my MS is I space quickly. And you asked me a question, and I want to get back to it. I'm so sorry I lost it.
Oh yeah. How do you use humor?
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
in the face of adversity.
Okay. So we get this property. We're back in Colorado. I don't want to stop being functional for my family. We have an acre of property. So my wife let me buy a John Deere tractor. And part of the problem with the John Deere tractor is I couldn't get up on it. I had to
that was my next one. How are you going to get up on this thing?
Well, I just got real strong and started pulling myself up, and I got it. But the problem, of a guy like me falling all the time is first of all, we tracked like 3 or 4 trips to the emergency room in the very beginning. After about 3 or 4 years, I realized I'd fallen 50 times. But now what you do, I was always an athlete, Ron. Didn't we learn how to fall?
Sure.
Didn't you watch the guys fall from the parachutes and learn how to buckle and fall and tuck and roll? Well, I've gotten real good at it. In fact, within the last week and a half, you can't see it now, I've got a big bruise right here.
Yeah.
I can pull myself up at a counter, and that's what I did for dinner. And I pull myself up, and as long as I'm holding onto the counter, I can eat with one hand, but I'm eating with one hand and I sneezed. Now, again, multiple sclerosis for me, when I sneeze, my whole body seizes, and I went right to the ground. But I tuck and roll. My wife is on top of me at every moment. She's almost there before I even hit the ground, but I've learned to fall. And so now we kind of like count them as there's another, and I've survived. Because in the beginning, I didn't survive. I had broken a rib. I had caused some real damage to a shoulder. So, I had to learn how to fall. So it's just become something that I'm not going to, I can't stop. I
Yeah.
even stand up. I've fallen down on the main street of Canyon City, Colorado, getting a newspaper. I've fallen in the middle of the street and had to sit there and had to pull my damn ass back up.
We're going to send you to the Olympics under the term falling.
That's it. I can be.
You're going to win a gold medal.
I'll get a gold medal at falling, no doubt.
Yeah.
But it's just something I've decided. I can't. I was okay till I turned 50, and I know that was 16 years ago. But I'm not about to stop. The only person that the only one that is in fear is my wife. She's always afraid that I'm going to hurt something. But every time I hit the deck, the first words out of my mouth are, "I'm okay. I'm okay."
Yeah, tuck and roll, tuck and roll.
I'm okay. Tuck and roll, baby. I got it.
Now, having MS does come with exacerbations or flare-ups, as you mentioned. What are the type of exacerbations that seem to plague you the most? And could you briefly tell the audience about the Epley Maneuver?
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. Now, in understanding multiple sclerosis, you know that there are lesions that appear on the brain. And wherever those lesions appear are the part of the body that are going to be affected. It just so happens my lesions are mostly on the part that affect my lower body. And they stopped. Okay, so I'm okay, but they stopped. I also have a lesion segment in the intercore of my brain where you have the crystals that set your balance.
Yeah.
You've got those little crystals in there. As long as they're okay, you're fine. But when you get vertigo, that means your little crystals are out of whack. Well, I've got a lesion in there, and I'm telling you, I can go from sitting up to standing up, and it kicks in, and I fall. My brain starts to twist. It was really bad at one time. When I was in Boulder a few years ago with my family, it got so bad that, I mean, when you're out of balance like that, regurgitation, I couldn't stop vomiting. It went on all day long. I was ill, but my wife and I had learned the Epley Maneuver. Now, the Epley Maneuver is a specific motion that you can make with your head. You've got to lay down, put your head to the left, let it sit there for a while. Then you got to sit yourself up. And see, the problem with that for me is my legs cease. So you really can't sit me up. So here's my wife and I in this bed in Boulder, this hotel, trying to do the Epley Maneuver all day long, trying to get my crystals lined up again. But eventually, 6 hours into it, we finally did. So if you have a vertigo problem, please look up the Epley Maneuver. First thing you need to do is go to a physical therapist. Let them teach you how to do it. You can actually look it up online, but as I always say, get a real professional first to teach you, because you'll learn things. But everybody who has that problem needs that Epley Maneuver. And I have done it within the past 2 years. I've been stuck again where I've had to stop, have my wife get me all set so she can sit me up and try to realign it. And so when I go to my chiropractor, because I always get my lower back always twisted. And so when I sit up at the chiropractor, that kicks it in. So it's something that I deal with constantly, but these are things I've learned to deal with. I do the best I possibly can. I know most of the time when I push myself too hard, I rarely go into total seizure, but it does and can happen. And it's mostly a stress-related incident. Something will happen. Unfortunately, an ex-wife could throw me into a total seizure, and it can happen. It all depends on where my mental state is. And it happens less and less now, but the symptoms I have never gone away. My legs, as I say, they're sitting here right now, stuck straight out. And I can't see out of my right eye because my adrenaline is running, and that's really what causes these things to start.
What prompted you to write the book detailing your life, titled "Come Get Me, Mother, I'm Through"?
Well, that little radio segment I used to have, that's how I ended it, because I was the little kid on the radio. I sounded like a little kid. So I'd take all these little calls on bed check, and then I'd say, okay, that's it. Come get me, mother. I'm through. That's just how I ended my show.
Yeah.
So that just, when I decided I was going to go ahead and tell my story, after I had sat down with Vince, and Vince had really kind of woken me up, and then, it was terrible because it was within 3 or 4 months after that when I woke up and got the news that he had passed away. So I just felt so blessed to be able to be back in this guy's existence in the latter part of his life. I really felt like he had done me a favor, like he almost reached out to me and said, come on, I need to help somebody.
He never forgot about you.
Oh, I
He never
love that
forgot.
guy.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, his wife appeared on my Instagram just this last week. And I've been looking for her because I wanted to send her a copy of the book. She just got a copy of the book yesterday. So she gets to read about it now. But Vince it really fixed me. It really helped me on this road to starting to try to find a new me. After being Kid Curry, the radio guy, I'm now a writer. This is what I do. I've written the one book, Come Get Me Mother, I'm Through, my memoir. I went on from there to write another book. It's called The Death of Fairness. And it's a very simple little story about what happened to a small American town and its only radio station after President Reagan rescinded the Fairness Doctrine in 1987. It's historical fiction. And it's spawned me to write another one. So that's what I do now. I can tell you that even my MS doctor tells me that since I've done this new thing, when I first decided to write the book, as a DJ, I knew I couldn't write. So I actually went out and hired the lady who was the founder of the Northern Colorado Writers Association. She had retired at the time, but she was floating around. And I went to one of their meetings one day, and I told them, listen, I need to write my memoir, and I need to have someone teach me how to write. And the lady said, well, here's somebody who might be able to help you. And so that's my lady. Her name is Carrie Flanagan. She is an author. She's got a variety of different books out on how to write for magazines. So she taught me. She spent 6 months. She wouldn't even talk to me for 6 months. She made me read books to learn how to write. And then when my 6 months were done doing that, she questioned me. She wanted to see if I had learned anything. And then I started researching and writing things and sending it to her, and she would send it back to me with the little red marks on it, like your teacher used to do. Yeah. And honed me to be a better writer. And now that I'm into my third, this next one is an 84,000 word novel. This is a real book, but it's so much better. The writing style is so much better. I've learned so much. And my MS doctor says this alone has probably grown my brain, because he believes that even though, and everyone knows, your brain can do a whole bunch of stuff, you can damage part of it and your brain can rewire. He thinks my brain has begun to rewire some, because I was not this fluent, not this cognizant 4 or 5 years ago, I guarantee you.
Well, shout out to Carrie Flanagan. I read the book and it was written excellently. I really enjoyed it.
I appreciate that.
Now, your wife has always fought for you regarding the healthcare system.
Yes.
And she said, Poppy, I make this system work for us because I have learned how to fight. So being a MS advocate, tell us your thoughts on the current healthcare system and you and your wife's philosophy about paying it forward.
Well, I think everyone knows, you've heard it over and over again, for the richest nation in the world, the richest country in the world, we have the worst healthcare, and we do. I can tell you that my wife had to fight to find the correct policy for me. I am uninsurable, by the way. I cannot get life insurance policies. They tell you, you see the TV commercials, you cannot be turned down for any reason. Yeah. That's BS. Yeah. They won't take a guy like me. In fact, I'm rated, everything that I do, even my healthcare in general, is rated about 20% higher than everyone else's, simply because I've got multiple sclerosis. Yeah. And that to me is atrocious. And the thing is, I can afford it. My wife will go out and search for days and try to find the correct policy for myself. And then she's got to find one for the rest of our family. My wife and my daughter, she finds insurance for them. So she has to pay double for insurance in this house. That's terrible. And it's really part of what we all do, but we can afford it. I see people constantly that he cannot, and it distresses me to no end. That's part of our pay it forward thing. That's why, whenever I get a new wheelchair, we give the old one away to someone that we know needs it. We give money to the Multiple Sclerosis Society, the American Heart Association. We give every holiday time. We both take around $100 bills. And there'll be that time you'll be standing in line at a store and you'll see some family walk up, and I'll find a way to just walk over and give it to them as I'm leaving and say, see ya, goodbye. Because I'm the guy in the wheelchair. I can roll away. No one can say anything to me. And we do that often, my wife and I. That we feel we need to help because we can do it. Most people can't. So she has a real thing about paying it forward. So,
Well, you're making a difference to those people, believe me.
Well, I think it's part of our, during the pandemic, I was a real advocate of the 100% tip. If you're going to spend $50 and give $50, give these people some money. They need it too. Unfortunately, we can afford to do so, but we do that at every angle we possibly can because we feel like, we understand. We went from living a life of not even thinking. Well, I can tell you that my father had both his legs amputated. What used to make me mad was people parking in handicap spaces. Well, it still sits in my craw. Okay.
Yeah,
it's just,
sure.
I'm a little bit more angry now. I don't have a problem leaving a note on the door. You shouldn't be parked here.
Yeah.
So
it irritates me as well.
It's really important. I think that, those of us who have clarity and good life and can do so to help out others.
Absolutely.
And so we do it every place we can. And I can tell, I feel I can tell, when I leave Whole Foods and that lady's there on the side and she's got a baby in her lap and she just looks despondent. I can tell that person needs money. So I've often turned back around and given cash to people like that. I just, that's just the way we are. That's just the way it is.
You're a good person.
This is what we do.
What advice do you have for people facing debilitating conditions such as yours or any other life adversities as far as dealing with their situation, both mentally and physically?
It's very difficult. I didn't know anything about what it was like. I go into the doctor's office and you see the people in the doctor's waiting room and nobody really talks to each other. Then my doctor once said, you probably ought to go to a men over 50 with MS meeting. And I did that. And I got to meet some people just like me. I didn't know what it was like to have MS until I saw them because I only knew what was happening to me. But suddenly I'm seeing people that are complaining about the same things I'm complaining about, having the same terrible, terrible problems I'm having. And it really made me think about, what we need to do to help people along. You've got to be able to be straight. It bothers me when I go to these men's meetings and men have tried the drugs and none of them have worked and they say they're not taking anymore. And then they disappear. They don't come back to the meeting. And all I wonder is what happened? So it's important that you try to keep your mind straight. Know that you've got to fight as hard as you possibly can. Don't give up. You can't give up because something can happen that can turn everything. I had a medicine change that changed it for me. And I still am not right, but it changed it for me. I'm not going to sit back and woe is me, my life. It's tough. It is tough to have a disease like this. And you can only know what you know about your situation. But knowing what I know about how it affected me, I see other people, and I can only hope that they have the clarity of mind to wake up every day and know that they should try to get through and be a good person, be in a good mood, and try to get through a very difficult time in their life by controlling their mind. And that's really what it's all about, controlling your mind, thinking of the good things you have and the good things that you can have if you just stay clear in your mind.
Kim, that's great advice. That's great advice. My last question is, what excites you going forward?
Man, Ron, this writing thing that I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And I just told you within the last 2 weeks, my new book that I've been shopping around to publishers all around has garnered the attention of a best-selling author. Writing is my passion. In fact, this book that I've completed now, I haven't even had my first meeting with these people I've signed a contract with yet. I'm waiting for them to look at my project and analyze it. But I ended this book already setting up the next book. So I'm already into the next thing. I'm already writing the next book. So this is where I'm going in my life. This is something I really enjoy doing. And my wife affords me, once again, the ability to be able to be a self-published writer. I spend money on this. My books get read. I get on podcasts like yours, Ron. I've got some issues I think that people need to know about. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm writing, having a good time. And the fact that a best-selling author has looked at my project and went, hey, I probably put out 70 different queries to publishers.
Yeah.
All of them, 50 of them came back negative, but 7 people took the time to write and say, I think you've got a good story here. We just don't do this. So that made me go, wait a minute, push harder. And it just so happens that I found this guy who goes, wait, this is good. So, I want to get this story out, and I want to get on to the next one, because I really have, writing fiction it's 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning here in my office.
I bet.
Where I'm sitting here coming up with scenarios, and, the scenarios all have to qualify. You can't, I have to research what I'm saying and research what I'm writing. So, it's really fun for me. The same effort that I used to be at the office at 5 o'clock in the morning running Power 96 and being there until 10 o'clock at night. It's the same thing. I've just transferred it from being Kid Curry Radio DJ program director to Kim Kid Curry, the writer. So that's what
I think your takeaway message is be a good person and don't give up.
And be good to people, man. Just be good to people.
Yeah. Kim, how can people follow and contact you?
Thanks for that. My website, krcurry.com, has all the information on my books. I've got blogs up there, and I just redid the website. It's going to get really active here in the next few weeks, because the people that I'm working with are going to help me spread the news about my upcoming book. So I've got a bunch of new things coming on the site, and that's at krcurry.com, krcurry.com. You can find me there.
Okay, I'm going to list your links in the podcast notes.
I appreciate it.
It's been an honor to have you on the podcast and hear your story. The name Kim Kid Curry will always be associated with inspiration, hope, and the overcoming of adversity and winding up on top. You never changed who you are. You only changed the way you expressed yourself. I hope we have given someone out there, after hearing your story, the inspiration to overcome their adversity or life challenge. We welcome all comments and suggestions to improve the podcast. You can email us at itsarapwithrap@gmail.com. Our website is itsarapwithrap.com. You can go to the website, sign up for our newsletter. We're on Facebook. It's a Rap with Rap. We are on YouTube. All the episodes are on YouTube. It's a Rap with Rap, the podcast uncut. Thanks everyone for listening and sharing the podcast with your friends and family. Please stay safe. And for now, it's a wrap.